Good evening to all. Satyanilayam Institute of Philosophy and Culture is very happy to welcome all of you to this international webinar, the 13th on the Cetesi series on the theme Mystical Dimensions of Hospitality. As we begin this seminar, let us seek divine providence in silence for a minute, praying that this virtual seminar may enlighten us and lead us to become seekers of truth. Thank you. Satyanilayam Research Institute of Philosophy and Culture is pleased to welcome all of you to this virtual seminar. On behalf of SNRI, Philip Cherian, a research scholar here at SNRI, extend a hearty welcome to Dr. Mohan Parasyan, Joint Director, Parliament of India, who has kindly accepted our invitation to share his philosophical insights. Welcome, Dr. Mohan Parasyan.
Hello.
We also welcome research scholar Anbarasu, who would also enlighten us with his presentation. Welcome, Anbarasu. A warm welcome to the staff and official of Satyanilayam, headed by Dr. Boniface Panna, the rector, and all other participants, including professors, the academia, students, and scholars from different institutes to this program. We hope your interaction with the resource persons of this seminar will be enlightening and enriching. Hearty welcome to you all. We will be happy and delighted if you keep your video switched on during the presentation to make us all feel connected. Satyanilayam Institute of Philosophy and Culture, Chennai, approved by the University of Madras, is a Jesuit research center for philosophy. It facilitates earnest search for truth and promotes human values through its three units: Doctoral Research Unit, General Research Unit, and Public Unit. It also serves as a center for dialogue between the philosophical tradition of the East and West. It encourages scholarly efforts to understand the earthly struggles of men and women and offer them possible ways and means for integral liberation. The publication unit of this institute brings out a biannual journal, Satyanilayam Chennai Journal of Intercultural Philosophy. The doctoral unit organizes various philosophical seminars, one such being the monthly webinar series named as Cetesi series. The General Research Unit engages in other events such as philosophy discussion forum, reading group, workshop, etc. Despite the pandemic, the zeal for the search for truth remains constant, and this encourages all. One of this deep search is found in today's webinar, Mystical Dimensions of Hospitality. Hospitality stands as the friendly and generous reception and entertainment of guests, visitors, or strangers. Hospitality refers to the relationship between a guest and a host, wherein the host receives the guest with goodwill. Hospitality is also the quality or disposition of receiving and treating guests or strangers in a warm, friendly, generous way. Showing hospitality means making others feel comfortable and welcome them happily to our homes. It is a kindness in welcoming guests and strangers. In today's context, hospitality is much more than a simple welcome or an offer of food or drink. Hospitality is an attitude of heart that opens us to others and receive them on their own terms. Henry Norman speaks of hospitality as a move from hostility to friendship. Hospitality therefore means primarily the creation of a free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy. Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place. Hospitality is not a subtle invitation to adopt the lifestyle of the host, but the gift of a chance for the guest to find his own. In this modern consumerist world, we hardly see guests visiting and staying in our homes. If they come just for a meal. There is a lack of deeper relationship, and this is a disturbing trend. People have become strangers with one another, and the virtue of hospitality seems to be fading away from our memories. It is an awakening call to go back to our roots, to know the hospitality of our ancestors, and to grow in this virtue of social engagement. In line with this thought, we have chosen the theme for today's SEDESI seminar as Mystical Dimensions of Hospitality. There would be two presentations in this webinar, one from the Eastern understanding and another from the Western angle. The first presentation would concentrate on the foundation upon which Ramalinga Adigala, a Tamil seer, builds the dimension of hospitality. And the second presentation would focus on Soren Kierkegaard's understanding of subjective experience and hospitality. As we now move into the first presentation, we are happy to introduce our research scholar at SNRI, Anbarasu D. Currently, he is pursuing a research on a philosophical analysis of social justice in the hospitality of Ramalinga Adigala under the supervision of Dr. Robin Sahayaseelan SJ. Anbarasu did his MPH at Dharmaram Vidya Kshetram 1998 to 2000. He holds master's degree in Christianity and philosophy and a Bachelor of Education. He teaches Indian philosophical studies such as ancient Indian philosophy, Upanishad, heterodox systems, and contemporary Indian philosophy in seminaries and institutes. Anbarasu has presented a few philosophical papers in national seminars organized by Association of Christian Philosophers in India on the following themes: Buddhist and Jainist view on non-violence, 2009, Roots of Indian Civilization, Historico-Philosophical Analysis, 2011, Bhakti in Indian Philosophical Traditions, 2013, and Bodhi in Saiva Siddhanta, 2014. In 2020, he presented a paper on compassion as the basis of hospitality and social justice for SEDESI seminar. He is a person filled with great enthusiasm and urgency, and his passion for Ramalinga Adigala keeps growing day by day. May I now invite Anbarasu D to present his reflection on Ramalinga Adigalar Understanding of Hospitality as Mysticism. He will present his paper for 20 minutes, followed by discussion and interaction.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Philip Cherian, for your warm welcome and also introducing the theme elaborately. So, good evening, my dear friends. Today, I am going to present my paper on Ramalinga Adigalar's understanding of hospitality as mysticism. I will share the screen. I have prepared PowerPoint. So, Ramalinga Adigalar's understanding of hospitality as mysticism is a theme. I'm going to present my paper. And this paper consists of following titles: Introduction, the notion of hospitality, philosophical understanding of hospitality in Ramalinga Adigalar, philosophical foundations of his hospitality, hospitality as mysticism, Ramalinga Adigalar's hospitality as a model, a philosophical implication in today's context, and conclusion. Coming to the introduction, an authentic attitude of hospitality roots at the heart of the person and moves the entire being to open up for everyone, irrespective of their differences. Hospitality is an attitude of heart that opens us to others and receives them on their own terms. In this modern consumerist world, we see hardly guests visiting and staying in our homes. Visits have become formal and time-bound. Traditional practices reveal that though visits are sudden, stays are made comfortable, the departure is not part of the dialogue. There is a sense of every welcoming nature which is present in the heart and mind of the people. So in this modern consumerist world, we hardly see people visiting and staying in our homes. Visits have become formal and time-bound. Traditional practice reveal that though visits are sudden, stays are made comfortable, that departure is not part of the dialogue. There is a sense of every welcoming nature which is present in the heart and mind of the people. Ramalinga Adigalar was hospitable to the people in the society, especially who suffered from the disease of hunger and other social evils of his time. Hospitality and compassion are the pillars of his philosophy, and for him, everything begins and ends in it. The aim of this paper is to highlight Ramalinga Adigalar's understanding of hospitality as mysticism. An attempt is made to answer the following questions. What is hospitality for Ramalinga Adigalar? How can a person be and become hospitable to oneself, to others, and other living beings in the world to create a harmonious relationship with one another? The notion of hospitality. The hospitality is defined as the relationship between a guest and host, wherein the host receives the guest with goodwill. Whereas another definition is, it is a quality or disposition of receiving and treating guests or strangers in a warm, friendly, generous way. Let me describe hospitality. And we find in the Tamil Sangam literature, Kalitogai, poem number 133, which says, hospitality as guidance, caring, courtesy, kindness, and wisdom. Whereas the other book from the Tamil Sangam literature, Ainguru Nuru, the poem 396, describes hospitality as accommodating the people as guests. In this poem, the husband and wife traveled to a distant place. In their journey, they felt very tired. And since it was in the midnight, the husband says to her wife that they can spend the night as guests to one of the houses in this town. This shows that in the olden days, people accepted newcomers and gave them accommodation. And the hospitality as welcome. Another book from Tamil Sangam literature, Eladi, song number 7 says that when a guest comes to house, the host has 6 elements. The first one welcomes with sweet words. Second, gives warm welcome. Third, offers a chair to sit. Fourth, feeds with the finest food. Fifth, never speaks hard words. And sixth, make the guest happy. When a host does all these six elements to the guest, he will also be accepted as a heavenly guest if he is able to greet and welcome. Hospitality is beyond time. The book Natine, song number 142, brings out the hospitality of the wife, which is very well praised by the husband. The reason for praising his wife is this: even if it is night time, when the guests come, she will welcome guests happily and serve them with variety of food. She is such a delicate woman with virtue. Philosophical understanding of hospitality in Ramalinga Adigalar. Let me bring out the context, the encounter with realities of life. Reality of hunger. During the 19th century, the state of Tamil Nadu was hit by 30 famines, and there was zero possibility for any cultivation. Countless people died of hunger. And the social cultural context, we find caste system was followed very strictly at the time. The untouchables were considered equal to deadly cops. Women were not allowed to get education. Sati system was exercised. In the economical context, people faced poverty. The British government tax system affected the agriculturalists. The people were in debt and were struggling to earn their livelihood. And the political context, India became the hotspot for hunting riches, establishing trades, and creating new law codes for benefit by the foreign investors. The British imposed a lot of rules and enslaved numerous people. Responding to the context, one such person who responded to his time was Ramalinga Adigalar. He Tamil's philosopher, mystic, and social reformer of the 19th century. He felt the sufferings of the people as his own suffering. His hospitality was based on compassion. His compassion towards all living beings did not stop with mere words, but expanded through humanitarian actions. So he started Satya Dharma Salai to meet the most fundamental needs of humans, which is food, and to extend hospitality with the unstinted hand to many a weary traveler and Indian old person. And the Satya Dharma Salai is a monument of Ramalinga Adigalar's great compassion towards humanity, as it still feeds the needy and the hungry daily. It stands as a testimony of genuine hospitality towards the hunger. Satya Dharma Salai served another purpose too. It reminded the people of equality. Samarasa Sutta Sarmarga Satya Sangam was started by Ramalinga Adigalar, a social expression of hospitality. And the Sangam was open to all people, irrespective of caste, sex, and religion. The following were the social reforms done through this institution: food for all, condemnation of caste system, liberation of women, and education for all. Jiva a new interpretation on the meaning of hospitality. Jiva means expression of love, kindness, and concern towards another being, an eagerness to share the sorrows of others, and a willingness to help and serve others by all possible ways. For Ramalinga Adigalar, Jiva means being compassionate, merciful, graceful to all the living beings on the earth. It also means going out of the way, being proactive, and seeking those who are suffering, identify their needs, helping them not only to come out of their crisis, but also to guide them to the way of God realization. Now we'll go to the philosophical foundation of Ramalinga Adigalar's hospitality. Let me bring out the spiritual enlightenment from Tirumular. According to Tirumular, God is love and love is God. To bring out this philosophy into action, Tirumular suggests in the following poem: it is for all to offer in worship a green leaf to the Lord. It is for all to give mouthful to the cow. It is for all to give handful of food to others before sitting down to eat. It is for all good, kind words on others to bestow. In this verse, Tirumular develops 4 steps. First one, he instructs the one to love and worship God, and the second, to love the other creatures. Third, he tells to feed the other human beings. And fourth, he suggests speaking good and kind words to others. Of these 4 steps, Ramalinga Adigalar was influenced by third and fourth one. This was expressed in Satya Dharma Salai of Ramalinga Adigalar. Social enlightenment from Thiruvalluvar. The ancient Tamil ethic poem of Thiruvalluvar, the Tirukural, is another ancient source that praises the virtue of hospitality. Chapter 9 of the Tirukural, 81 to 90, is completely dedicated to the theme of hospitality. The chapter instructs the householder to receive guests courteously and cheerfully. Ramalinga Adigalar was heavily influenced by the teachings of Thiruvalluvar. Personal enlightenment, the first one, hospitality of his mother. Before the birth of Ramalinga Adigalar, his mother Chinnamai welcomed a sage who was standing in front of Adigalar's house. She offered him seat and managed to get some food. Sage was well pleased by her hospitality and uttered Arulvaku, the graceful words, I see the divine presence of Lord Muruga here. You will be blessed with a son who will rise up to the great heights of glory. And the second, hospitality of his sister-in-law. Ramalinga Adigalar lost his parents when he was a small boy. His brother's wife treated him like a mother. It changed the life of Ramalinga Adigalar. The motherly love, care, and protection of his sister-in-law had an impact on his life and philosophy. He saw the providence of the divine in the person of his sister-in-law. And finally, hospitality of the divine. Later, Ramalinga Adigalar experienced hospitality of the divine in the form of Lord Shiva. He had Lord Shiva as his Ammai Appan, father and mother. We'll go to the hospitality as mysticism, the topic of the day. The general understanding of mysticism is it is the immediate experience of oneness with the ultimate reality. The goal of mysticism is union with the divine or sacred. It is re-establishment of the harmony between human and divine. A person who successfully pursues and gains such communion can be called mystic. Ramalinga Adigalar as a mystic. From the very early days of his life, he showed the symptoms of deep urge for mysticism and mystical revelations. He had an inner urge for simple life and asceticism. Throughout his life, he lived a life motivated by the inner urges of divine relationship and social humanitarian development. So I would like to bring his mystical life in 3 stages. Life at Chennai, he was motivated by an intense urge to search for God. He made frequent visit to different temples, and it is here he composed most of his poems. In those days, a great devotion to Lord Muruga and was under his feet in the temple. The feet of God has a protective significance in the Tamil devotion. As he grew up, his devotional urges were switched over to the worship of Shiva, the Nadaraja. Life at Karungudi, the important year in his life. Here, his ideologies went through a great change, deeply motivated by spiritual maturity. He felt the need to include the social dimension in seeking pursuit. His conviction is to render service to all beings would be the true path. His desire and commitment to spread love to all creatures motivated him to found a society for religious unity and universal love. And finally, life at Vadalur, he was urged by the divine power to have further inner transformation of his understanding regarding religion, society, his personal relations with God, and cosmic realities. I would like to bring out Ramalinga Adigalar's mystical experience. The term, these are Tamil words, asai, that is desire, unarvu, feeling, and urugudal, melting, are the basic mystical expressions to the experience of the inner urge of God. Asai, he has no desire in the world except reaching the graceful feet of God. His only urging desire is to attain the unity of relations with the Shivan. He says, It is my desire, O my Father, to have union with you in this world of life with living creatures, to remain inseparably united with you through 3402. And Unarve, the feeling, he calls Shivam as Unarve, who is the inner force of the soul and inner light of the motivation. He speaks that Shivan rises to eliminate the motivation. Guru melting is the expression of the inner longing for the divine, the inner feelings of the intimate experience of God. There are some mystical symbols that are used in Ramlinga Adigalar. Light. Light symbolizes divinity, love, grace, truth, compassion, and eternal power. One can experience God in the worship of Jyoti. He identified Jyoti as the true light of knowledge. Arul Perum Jyoti, Tani Perum Karunai, Arul Perum Jyoti was the mantra that he received from the divine supreme power. He realized that this Jyoti mantra would illuminate the heart of all, illuminate the world, darkness from the earth, and will lead to knowledge, truth, and bliss. And another symbol is temple. There is a saying in Tamil, Kovililla Uri Kudirikka Vendam. Never reside in a locality that has no temple. It is the temple which transforms us from being a mere person to perfect personality. Temples guide us in the contact of our affairs and enlighten our vision. It is the visit to the temples that initiates us to the study of our goal in life and relationship with God. And Ramlinga Adigalar visited many temples and understood the goal of his life. Temples served as a place for contemplation and introspection, as they did to Ramlinga Adigalar. They served as a platform for self-examination and inquiry, served as eye-opener and temple experience enlightened Ramlinga Adigalar from idol worship to self-realization. So having done research on hospitality of Ramlinga Adigalar and the mysticism of Ramlinga Adigalar and understood his hospitality as mysticism, I would like to propose some models to establish a society based on hospitality in line with the teachings of Ramlinga Adigalar. So the next topic will be my contribution, and it is for discussion also. Ramlinga Adigalar's hospitality as a model, a philosophical implication in today's context. The first, hospitality as a model for being and becoming. Touching the feet of the divine brings holiness. Touching the feet of Guru, parents, and elders gives solemn blessings. And touching the persons bring ourselves being closer to them. At the time of Ramlinga Adigalar, there were untouchables. Touching them was a sin. There were a lot of inhuman treatments. For instance, they could not go to the street of higher caste and were not allowed to wear footwears in front of them. They were forced to stay in cheri, and food was distributed to them in the streets and the cowshed. Responding to the contest, Ramlinga Adigalar brought all the people under Satya Dharmasala, and people were able to experience the touch among themselves. This touch brought a foundational aspect that there are no untouchables in this house of Dharmasala. Human beings were the manifestation of God, and hence it was improper to divide them as high and low. All are equal before the eyes of God. Being in the touch of the divine, we are invited to become the touch for others in the sense to be lover and hearer of the people who are broken in the society. Next model, hospitality as a model for being and becoming the grace. Ramlinga Adigalar maintained that grace can be realized when one identifies oneself in all the living beings and has the tendency to help the sufferers. Only at this stage, according to him, one could enjoy real bliss. In his Arul Perum Jyoti Agaval, he points out that God dwells only in those hearts filled with grace. The nature of reality is grace. There is divinity in every living being. Everyone is called to experience the divine grace in and around and be graceful to the living beings. And the third model, hospitality as a model for harmony. Harmony is a situation in which people live and work well with other people. The meaning of this word gives another understanding of creating a peaceful atmosphere. The peaceful atmosphere is possible only when we create a good relationship with the divine, with oneself, and with other living beings. Ramalinga Adilar maintained his relations with God, himself, and other living beings. His relationship with God was experiencing God as a compassionate Savior who is light. He received the light, shared that light, and through his compassionate works. For Ramalinga Adilar, the metaphysical concepts, being and becoming, apply. Being in the light, receiving the light, and becoming light for others through compassionate acts. Let us create peaceful atmosphere in the world by building a good relationship with all, speaking sweet words with one another, avoiding harm to others, either physically or mentally, and avoiding the look of harshness and wickedness. The fourth model, hospitality as a model for extensiveness. It means inclusiveness. It also means the ability to accept and accommodate others as they are. The ability to accept and accommodate others as they are, what they are, and how they are needs more openness and broad-mindedness. Ramalinga Adilar made a great change in his society in accommodating all the people, irrespective of caste and religion, in Sanmarga. His hospitable act, Food for All, in Dharmasalai, under one fold, irrespective of caste, religion, sex, and status, rich and poor, was the best example for extensiveness. Let us promote the feeling of oneness, irrespective of caste, religion, sex, status, society, and nation, by accepting and welcoming others as what, how, and where they are. And finally, hospitality as a model for selfless service. Selfless is defined as having little or no concern for oneself with regard to name and fame, position, money, etc. Selfless service would mean doing or performing an act without expecting any rewards. Utilizing one's mind, speech, and body in doing any kind of selfless service for the greater good of others is an important factor. A selfless person does not work for name and fame or selfish glory. Ramalinga Adilar stands as the best model for selfless service. Through the Dharmasali, he fed the people without any expectation or reward. His mission was to dedicate himself for a selfless service to human beings at large. Let us become a selfless person by caring for everyone, getting away from egoistic nature, being empathetic in nature, and achieving the love of others through compassion. And conclusion, Ramalinga Adilar as a mystic experienced the hospitality of the divine through Arul Perum Jodi. After the divine experience, he started living as a light to the people and other beings. He became fully hospitable to the people as an individual and through his charitable acts. He recognized the divine power in all the living beings and honored them by serving them compassionately. I finally conclude with the quotes of Valalar, Ramalinga Adilar. Whenever I saw withered crops, I too withered. Where there is compassion naturally, there the divine manifests miraculously. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Anperesu, for your presentation. The floor is now open for discussion and interaction.
Let me.
Please raise your question to the presenter.
Andrew, first of all, appreciations to you, and you have given a beautiful, you've taken us through the life of Ramalinga Adigalar, and you have really done it well. Thank you so much. Also, you have very elaborately, very systematically you have done, and I see a great progress from your previous presentation.
Thank you.
It's very nice, and so I appreciate you for that. Wonderful. I don't know if there is some background music at someone's others. Yeah, so I would request others. Okay, fine. Sorry, not Isu. Andrew, I have just a few questions, but let me just begin with one question. Ramalinga Adikalar seems to be more focused on God than on people. While the mystical dimension that you are saying is about giving and receiving, the point here seems to be more about giving to God. And because I want to show that I'm hospitable, I will give. But what did he actually receive? So that's my first question. The second question is, why is it he was so silent about structures, social structures? He's definitely was speaking about a lot of grace and divinity. And my third question is there a necessity to postulate God to be hospitable? Can we not just have, can we just stop with humanity and be still mystical and not bring in God elements at all? Thank you.
Thank you, Father, for your appreciations and putting forward 3 questions. And I believe, first of all, Father, can you repeat the first question further? I just left it.
It's okay. Answer the next 2 questions. No problem.
You were silent about the structure. You were telling about it. Maybe his background was very poor. He did not belong to high caste, and he was belonging to the lower caste. He was challenged by the higher caste people, and he was not able to give them good fight. And even his disciples did not support him. The disciples of Ramalinga Adigalar, they saw him as a miracle worker and giving food and all. That's why today we find only in some parts of Tamil Nadu, Ramalinga Adigalar is famous, in some states also. Whereas the other states, we don't find Ramalinga Adigalar. His thoughts are not taken to the people. That's point. So that's why he was silent. He was silent about it. He was not able to fight with the dominant groups. And the God element, yes, without coming, you see, actually speaking, Ramalinga Adigalar, in the beginning of his life, till he came to Karungudi, he was visiting like a mystic, and he was visiting the temples, chanting the devotional hymns, and there was just he was more in touch with the divine being. And at the Karungudi, there was a transformation took place in his life because he was able to see the struggles of the people. That's why he says, "Vadiya paire kanda bolam vadine." So he took the sufferings of the people as his own suffering and began to work. But the basic foundation for Ramalinga Adigalar was the God aspect. So that's what I find. So being in the company, because in the life of Ramalinga Adigalar, he missed the love, care, and concern of his parents. And as I told, the personal experience of the hospitality from his mother and sister-in-law and the divine. So he missed it. I think.
Thank you. We will talk later. We'll give chance to others.
Okay.
Thank you.
Andrew, congratulations, Andrew, for your wonderful presentation. I think, can we describe Vallala as a successor of various Siddhas we have? You spoke about Thirumular, Taimanavar, Arunagirinathar. There are so many Siddhas are there. But can we say that he was really following them, or was he different from all these Siddhas? And to the question what Father Robin just now asked, Vallala was completely a radical man. That's what from a little reading, I understand. he was a radical man because he never, he was a Saivite, he was worshipping Lord Shiva, but in course of time, I think he was slowly, he was away from that Vedic structure, and he was trying to start a new ideology. And there, he never used the word temple. That's what I read. He never used the temple. Jnana Savai so that he speaks about Jnana Savai, never used the temple. And also, he never later on, he never spoke about Lord Shiva. He speaks about light. God is a light. He was against idol worship. So in that sense, he was completely different. And also hospitality, he was not really in line with the thinking about hospitality in line with the Siddhas, Tirumular, Tayumanavar, all those people. He was radically different from all these Siddhas. And also he was different in a way. He was against the Vedic literature, Brahmanism. He was completely against them. In that way, he was radical. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Jesus, for your contribution. And God as a light, you rightly said, it doesn't mention, but in the beginning of his life, he was worshipping Muruga, Chidambaram, Nataraja, he was worshipping. So in the Thiruvaruppa, we have 6 Tirumurais, 5 Tirumurais, we have the chants, the hymns for these gods. And later only the 6th Tirumurai, there is a change that took place in Karungudi. It started worshipping God as a light. So as you said, it doesn't mention temple, but as a Jnana Sabha. And he is not a successor of any, he made his own path further. Even people say this Annadanam is started by Ramalinga Adigalar. That's what in my reading I found. Thank you, Father Jesus, for your contribution.
Yes, I have one question, something coming to me, and am I audible?
Yes, Father.
Yes.
Yeah. So actually, your presentation.
Could you just introduce yourself also?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. So thank you for presenting very nicely this one, hospitality. I found this one like that, the table fellowship of Jesus. I find this. But sometimes what I feel, this presentation did not speak about the justice and reconciliation, I find. If there is no reconciliation, no justice, then how this hospitality will come? This is the question arising within me. In today's context, when we have social injustice, sometimes political injustice, cultural injustice, ethnic injustice, how could we be hospitable in that situation? This is the question arising. Could you actually explain something about this? Thank you.
Okay, fine, Father. And I think you started 3 institutions, and I just mentioned about Dharmasalai, and also another institution, Sanmargam. Sanmarga, Sutta Sanmarga Satya Sangam. Here only it is an expansion of social justice. He was speaking about hospitality oneself. In this Sangam only, he promoted for the people, redeeming the people from slavery and the women education and the liberation of women, and some social actions were taken in this Sangam further. So totality, I mean here, the Sangam of Ramalinga Adigalar brought out some kind of liberty acts. And the last time when I presented this paper, also I spoke about the social justice as an expansion of hospitality in the philosophy of Ramalinga. So last topic was that.
This is Stalin. Congratulations, Andrew and Barasu, for your beautiful presentation on the mystical aspect of hospitality by Ramalinga Adigalar. Ramalinga Adigalar was a praxis-oriented person. He, through praxis, he wanted to bring out his philosophy, that is hospitality and equality. Equality, inequality, that is the main concept that disturbed many people. Ramalinga Adigal also was very much affected by that, whether that is Valluvar or Ramalinga Adigal, or all these people were disturbed by the then existing system of inequality. And even Jesus was disturbed by inequality. And rightly, Mr. Valentin pointed out that Jesus was a praxis-oriented person who hosted meal together, right? So he gave them all meal equally to sit down and eat together. That was a radical thing, and that's what Ramalinga Adigalar has done that. So it was so beautifully brought out. And you also pointed out the hospitalities of the hospitality is the manifestation of mercy towards people. That is a manifestation of God himself. I'm interested, since you started with mysticism, how this mystic Ramalinga Adigalar, his mysticism is different or radical from other traditional mystics of the West or of the East.
Okay, thank you, Father Stalin, for your appreciation and also putting forth this question. I have not compared Ramalinga as a mystic with the other mystics. Maybe I will make a research on this and do it further. And one more point you brought out very well about the equality. And you see the Satya Dharma Salai, irrespective of caste, religion, rich and poor, everybody was able to sit and have their meal together. And also the people, those who serve the food, they should respect the people, those who are sitting for meal. They should not speak any filthy words to them. So in that way, he brought out the social justice and the equality among the people. Paris?
Father Andrew, just Raj Gautaman, the great scholar from Pondicherry, while he was analyzing Ramalinga Vallalar, he speaks about that Ramalinga Vallalar had a kind of, how to name it, I don't know how to say it, but he was not treating everyone equally in a way. All those eat non-veg and all those who are murderers, and he says, you can feed them, okay, out of compassion. But he said he divided the people into Puravinatar, Agavinatar, Gentiles, and their own, two groups he divides. And you can feed them, but you cannot relate with them. He was saying that. So just bringing to kind of attention how to justify this. Okay.
Any more questions?
Hello.
Hello, Father Aaron.
Good evening to everybody. Father Anbu, are you able to hear?
Yes, Father, I am able to hear you.
Anbu, it's a wonderful presentation, really very informative. You are moving towards very scientifically. Really, I am very much happy that you are rightly guided by Father Robin. Nice. Anbu, Ramalinga Adigalar Vallalar, he speaks of the theory of evolution. That means the immortality and eternity. He speaks of. He speaks when you think of speaks about human evolution. He tells human evolution means transformation of physical body into a body of wisdom light. Okay.
Yes.
A person's body should transfer into a body of wisdom, wisdom or light. Here I want to ask a question. In today's context, we the humans, we are not moving towards wisdom or light, but we are all striving for, but remain with the same nature of our own physical body. Here I want to ask, what blocks everyone to remain with the physical body alone, not moving towards body of wisdom or light? If we move towards a body of wisdom, move towards into the body of wisdom and light, what do you say in hospitality and equality? These things will be possible in our life, but we are not so. What blocks us?
Maybe I want to add this point, since there was a lack of time. I had to complete my presentation within 20 minutes. There was another symbol also in Ramalinga Adigalars, exactly said about the body. So in this, he speaks about the body. When we do some good actions, especially being hospitable to the people, our body will become golden body. So he speaks of four kinds of body. And he speaks of four kinds of body. In that, in the physical body will transform into golden body because of our good actions, being merciful, being compassionate with the living beings. The problem that what blocks us is our own selfishness and the egoistic nature. That is the block that we have. So we have to throw away this egoistic nature. I am the one who is great. So we have that kind of the pride in ourselves. So when we throw away all this egoistic nature, definitely we'll attain to the golden body. Our physical body will transform into golden body.
So
Thank you.
all the best. All the best. Can I just add on to what Andrew just now said? You know, very often we stop with the ego and we blame everything. We come to that point and say everything is caused by ego. But I would like to go one step deeper and consider that the point which blocks us is that experience of emptiness. An emptiness that is deep within projects itself in the sense of an empty pride. And that empty pride is the reason. So a feeling of emptiness. Now, Ramalinga Adigalar exactly points to that emptiness and says, light cannot be empty. Light fills everything. And so I would think the actual problem or the block is not the ego, but the experience of emptiness of every human person. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Father Ravi.
May we conclude our interaction with Father Anparasu D. Thank you, Father. We have Father Lindsay Lobo SJ, SNRI Program Coordinator, for some announcements. Welcome, Father.
Yeah, so good evening, everyone. And first and foremost, thank you all for participating. And we just have one announcement that we want to make is we want to call for papers. So let me just, yes, so we invite you to contribute an article from a perspective of your choice on either of these themes. So it can be on solidarity or on well-being. So the last date for submitting the abstract is on the 30th of Jan, and the final submission will be on the 20th of February. And the best articles would be selected for the Ignis Award. Now, the Ignis Award was something that was launched in the first inaugural that we had on the 25th of June. So thank you, and we can now move ahead with the other presentation. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Father Lindsay. Before we go for the next paper presentation, may I invite all of you to be present on video for a photo session.
Could others also please come? We will have to take the photo a little quick. We don't have time much. Thank you.
Thank you. The next presentation is by Dr. Mohan Parasian, who will address us on the theme Kierkegaardian Subjective Experience and Hospitality. Dr. Mohan Parasian is the Joint Director at Parliament of India. He is a Delhi-based independent researcher with a PhD in philosophy and a law degree. He has taught philosophy undergraduate classes before joining the Parliament of India in 2004. His areas of interest are ethics, political philosophy, continental philosophy, and philosophy of law. Presently, he is working on the crossroad of moral philosophy, governance, and legitimacy. His recent publication is on moral law and quest for selfhood, published by Routledge in July 2016. His recent lectures and presentations are as follows: Fundamental freedom in a state of exception as panelist in law, media, and COVID-19, organized by Indian Law Institute, New Delhi, May 2020. Issues in environmental philosophy and the present crisis, as resource person in national webinar on the subject organized by Tezpur College, July 12, 2020. Law and integrity, existence, legal order in dharmic understanding, International E-Conference on Law and Spirituality, Exploring the Bonds, organized by Campus Law Center, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi from 27 to 29 August 2021. Forthcoming, Philosophy for Environmental Policy and Law, in International Seminar on Environment Across Disciplines, Perspectives on the 21st Century, organized by Bodoland University, Assam, to be held from 9th February 2022 to 11th February 2022. May I now invite Dr. Mohan Parasian to make a presentation on Kierkegaardian subjective experience and hospitality. He will present his paper for 20 minutes, followed by discussion and interaction. Welcome, Dr. Mohan.
Thank you, Mr. Cherian. Respected Director Satyanilayam, other faculty members, research scholars and students. The theme for Andrew's presentation, that is Ramalinga Adigalar's understanding of hospitality as mysticism, it has opened up many dimensions so far as our understanding of hospitality is concerned. The philosophical underpinnings in his practice, as somebody has rightly pointed out, the philosopher of praxis, he was a philosopher of praxis. That thing, it came naturally to my mind when hospitality was the theme that I should be speaking on Soren Kierkegaard, because of the subjective element in his philosophy and the method of his philosophizing, that is the indirect method of philosophizing in Kierkegaard. And his influence in other modes of philosophizing and so far, even in linguistics, in political philosophy, in Habermasian understanding of communication, the possibility of communication. So that was the reason that I had preferred to speak on Kierkegaard's subjective experience and hospitality. Now, though a contemporary of Heidegger, Soren Kierkegaard, he is separated from, in space from Heidegger, but in spirit and in the basic philosophy, there are many similarities also, which I just now discovered. I didn't study Heidegger much. I had just gone through some of his poems translated into English after getting this invitation. Now, Kierkegaard is well known as the father of existentialism. Now, he revolutionized Western philosophical tradition with his stress on the subjectivity as truth. I will explain what subjectivity as truth he is talking about. He has a profound influence on almost all the existentialist philosophers like Sartre, Buber, Camus, Heidegger, and also on Levinas, Derrida, and Habermas, which I have just mentioned. And all of them has improved those ideas, which was very potent in Kierkegaard's writing, in their work, particularly Derrida. And some Caputo and Derrida have specifically spoken on, they've written on hospitality particularly. So Derrida had a different take on it, which is different from Kierkegaard and even from Heidegger's approach. But that Derridan perspective, I would like Ambarasu to go through before completing his research project, which would be very interesting. And though it's a very different way of looking at the ideas which he has dealt with. I shall try to explain this concept of hospitality with the help of two categories in Kierkegaard. And then finally, I will conclude with the philosophy of Martin Buber, which I think is a logical extension of what Kierkegaard has spoken about. The potent ideas of Kierkegaard, they are actualized in Buber, particularly that famous book, I and Thou. These two categories that I have mentioned are the categories, the concept of indirect communication and subjectivity as truth. Now, hospitality is to welcome the uninvited other, as Ambarasu has also mentioned. The unforeseeable stranger without a horizon of expectations. There is no expectation involved in hospitality. Derrida, which I have mentioned just now, says that hospitality must be unconditional. Otherwise, it is not hospitality. Or as Caputo puts it, hospitality is an unconditional affirmation without a why. Why I am inviting him, why I am welcoming him. But Derrida notes that there is an etymological ambiguity in the very idea of hospitality, which is derived from the Latin word hostis, a stranger which might be hostile or a guest or a hote, who is in need of a host. So the notion hostage and hostility is inscribed in the very idea of hospitality. Therefore, which captures the neologism, which Derrida coins this neologism, hospitality. But for Kierkegaard, hospitality, like any other man-to-man relation, involves deeper subjectivity. Subjectivity which strips down to the core of one's individuality. Further, subjective experience on which the entire Kierkegaardian writing circumnavigates is itself a dimension of mysticism. But mysticism in Kierkegaard should not be understood only in the sense of the God or the God figure, but also an individual subjective experience which could be with man-to-man, could be in the context of man-to-man relation also. And irrespective of our faith in God, that could also be a mystic experience. Even in a man-to-man relation, a mystical element could be there. In both these senses, in divine or theological or religious sense, or even in a secular sense, mysticism is purely a subjective experience, which cannot be explained by ostensibly referring to the external world, or even by taking recourse to reason alone. Now, reason has a kind of abhorrence for paradoxes, because paradoxes do not follow the rules of reason. This is, I'm paraphrasing one quote by Kierkegaard himself. So it's simply because reason doesn't follow the rules of, paradox doesn't follow the rules of reason. Reason is abhorrent about paradoxes. Kierkegaard uses the story of Abraham and Isaac and says that the actions of the knight of faith, Abraham as a knight of faith, cannot be rationally comprehended. Therefore, we need to go beyond reason in order to comprehend or to understand the action of Abraham in him being ready to sacrifice his son, following the orders of God. These experiences, these subjective, internal subjective experiences, can only be intersubjectively communicated. This is what, therefore, Kierkegaard says that, and he adopts the method of indirect communication, because he says in direct communication, you will be offending the opponent, in this context we can talk about the guest also. But even in a debate, if you want to convince a person, or if you want to dispel the illusions of a person, you have to communicate indirectly. Otherwise, your actions, your words will be offending to the person. And therefore, the indirect communication is the best possible way of communicating religious and ethical truth. This is a very clear-cut stand that Kierkegaard takes. He uses many methods of indirect communication, and the famous, and rather the most infamous of them, is use of pseudonyms. He has written dozens of books under various other names, under pseudonym. And the purpose behind using the pseudonym was not to hide himself or to hide anything else, but to present different point of views and let the point of view confront themselves. It is like his pseudonyms of various books are like characters of a different novel. And in the bigger corpus, character in one novel, and the bigger corpus of Kierkegaardian writing, they become different mouthpieces. These various authors that he mentions are the different mouthpieces, and ultimately the reader will have to decide which side to take. This method of indirect communication, he says, is the best suited to communicate ethical and religious truth. And he also uses metaphor and irony to communicate these things. Now, Kierkegaard favors indirect communication because he has the view that this indirect method is suggestive rather than non-authoritative. It is not assertion of fact or assertion of truth, which is objective truth, but pursuing other to follow the subjective truth that the author has understood, and he is wooing the reader to follow the path that he has understood. He does not want to impose his viewpoints on other, but he uses Socratic method, which is open and suggestive. Socratic method of midwifery, which he says that while writing pseudonymously, his purpose is particularly to act like a Socratic midwife, to assist the birth of truth, which is truth for the other person to realize. My truth may be for me to realize, but everyone has his own realization so far as ethical and religious truths are concerned. The reader may remain unconvinced by an argument, but the argument is only a part, even though an important one, of indirect communication in Kierkegaard. In indirect communication, the reader is treated as a guest. He is not coerced into believing my truth, but is given the neutral space to realize his own truth. This is not only the hospitable space for interpersonal, intercultural, or interreligious communication, but it is also an epistemic condition for any genuine communication whatsoever. Kierkegaard wishes to assist his reader to grow in faith or in love or in courage, or to question whether one's commitments in life is tantamount to a quest for ethical food. As he says, if you can find exactly the place where the other is and begin there, you may perhaps have the luck to lead him to the place where you are. So if you want to convince someone to accept your point of view, you have to start from his point of view. That is to say, Kierkegaard has a moral and religious intention to help his guest, his reader, or the other to attain the good life. And this intention is embedded in every piece of his writing. He gives the example of Christ, the God in the cross, as the very non plus ultra of indirect communication. For he is a God, and at the same time, he is helpless in the hands of his enemies. Can we imagine a better and intense way of indirect communication? That was the best way to communicate the truth. And that paradoxical situation, reason won't be able to comprehend. Now, coming to hospitality again, it is an attitude of the heart that opens us to others and receives them on their own terms. It is the creation of a free space. And I have mentioned initially Habermas because creation of free space or a discursive space has always been the target, always been the objective of Kierkegaard. In creating that space, the objective is not to transform the other or to assimilate the other into our own thought world, but to provide an enabling platform to the other. And a platform for the potential self to become what one already is. That is, to actualize the potential of the other. This philosophy is involved in the very idea of hospitality that Kierkegaard, though not directly, but hints at and later other philosophers have developed on it. We cannot be fully aware of ourselves as ourselves unless we are aware of other selves. That is why psychoanalyst Lacan and another existentialist philosopher Sartre, they would like us to believe that we rediscover ourselves in the gaze of others. It's not in my conversation with the other, it's not that I am helping the other only, but I am rediscovering myself. So we know ourselves in the gaze of others. Kierkegaard would actually definitely not accept this Lacanian psychoanalytical explanation, and he would term it as inauthentic existence, or what Kierkegaard says, living with the crowd. Because if you judge yourself from the eyes of others, Kierkegaard would definitely object to it. He would say the crowd is a lie, and that living in the crowd or the crowd is a hindrance to render my account to before eternity as an individual. Because everyone have to account before the eternity as an individual. And if we hide behind the crowd, then that becomes an inauthentic existence. And that inauthentic and authentic is a category which is used by almost all existentialist philosophers from Kierkegaard, Heidegger, Sartre. For Kierkegaard, human self is not a finished product, but a developing process. It is a becoming. The self is incomplete, a lack, but there is a substantial being undergoing the process of becoming, and this includes potentiality. Individual has tremendous potential to relate inwardly to the source of his values, and therefore he doesn't teach virtues to individuals, but only says, know thyself. And like the Socratic midwife, he will lead you to a particular place, but from there you are on your own. Therefore, it is the governor of what life is and what life means. In other words, selfhood is a process in which a person must try to become what one already is. To become what one already is not an insignificant task. It is not a triviality, because what one already is includes potentialities that must be actualized to fully become oneself. In some other context, there is a Vedantic saying, I think in Kathopanishad, Vimuktasya vimuchyate. That which already free needs to be freed. It doesn't means it's only a matter of realizing that it is free. So Ambarasu may relate this concept with the Ardaliga's philosophy. Vimuktasya vimuchyate of Kathopanishad, and there must be, when he is Saivite, there must be some Upanishadic influence also in him. Philosophy is an activity which we come to understand what in one sense we already know. Even in philosophy, we don't discover truths, but we rediscover things. We already know things, but we lack the language, the articulation of expressing it. And when the philosopher articulates it and expresses it with the help of metaphors or with the help of other examples, or with the help of his philosophizing, we realize that I was also thinking in the similar line, but I was only failing in articulating it. This knowing is not objective knowledge. This is very interesting point that Kierkegaard makes. It is one thing to know that all of us will die, and the statistics about the average life expectancy and the major causes of death, and another thing to ask about the implications of the fact of death for the meaning of life and how it should be lived. Knowing the causes of death may not enable me to understand life, but knowing death inwardly, subjectively, will enable me to understand the meaning of life. I will give one example of the pandemic situation. If the pandemic has changed our attitude towards life and fellow beings, then some credit we must give to the queues in cremation grounds and shortage of body bags that the news channels have reported us. We have seen death during the second wave. I don't know much about Chennai, but in Delhi, Ahmedabad, Lucknow, in most of the northern cities, there were queues in cremation ground, and that experience has drastically changed the way we look at our lives. And many of us might have not only changed it, but even started working on it. Heidegger also advises us to spend more time in graveyards to live an authentic life. There's a very beautiful passage in Heidegger also. That is why Kierkegaard says, think subjectively and one will discover the layers of human existence. Kierkegaard says that the guest whom I welcome, the other person or the reader, in whichever way you take it, is also a possibility. When I understand another person, his reality is for me a possibility. And in its aspect of possibility, this concept reality is related to me precisely as the thought of something I have not done is related to the doing of it. Kierkegaard unquote. Hospitality at the macro level could also be understood as the basic normative requirement which is necessary to establish an ethical condition for intersubjective communication at global level, where discursive communication regarding the substance of a future condition of cosmopolitan justice is to be subjected to the global public vision. So there is another dimension to hospitality in terms of international refugee crisis, in terms of migration, in terms of racism. So these are also some of the aspects which we can touch upon, developing on the philosopher that we may be working. The aim of philosophy for Kierkegaard is to awaken oneself to his own authentic existence. Like Saint Augustine, Pascal, and Martin Luther, Kierkegaard repeatedly goes back to the idea of a personal self standing before the God. To live in this radiant light of eternity where there is no way of deceiving God. The individual stands before the other, is full of fear and trembling, is about its eternal destiny. He is deeply conscious of its solitude, finitude, and fallibility. And that dread or that angst gives him the fuel to stand as an existential being. According to Kierkegaard, this ability of a man to stand alone is a true freedom and is the basis of all morality also. All ethical, in Kierkegaard, the ethics is founded on individuality. Kierkegaard believes in living as an individual. For in eternity, each shall render account as an individual. The king shall render account as an individual, and so the beggar. Kierkegaard calls this accounting before individual the voice of conscience. In eternity, conscience is the only voice that is heard. The single individual, before relating to the other, relates to himself in front of God. It is in the witness of God that true hospitality condition could be imagined. In an ideal hospitable condition, there is no need to be convinced by each other. This is another, this is now I'm shifting track to Habermasian ideas of communication. Now there is no need to convince each other. In the intersubjective communication, the guest and the host are relative to each other. Both are the guest and both are the host. See, then only real communication is possible. In this sense, Kierkegaard offers a new version of universalizability, unlike that of Kant. His Kierkegaard's universalizability begins by examining the interactions of individuals with others, instead of from the claim of how can a self-centered individual act morally. The main problem before Kant was how a selfish person can act morally, because he will have to universalize. If he acts immorally, then in that universalizable, in his universalized principle, he will be the sufferer. So indirectly, Kant is also appealing to our bad side rather than the good side. You will be afraid of universalizing a particular principle, and therefore you will be moral. This is the biggest criticism that I have found against Kant by none other than Kierkegaard. So his universalizability is different from Kant. Now each of us live our life in anticipation of our own death. Learning to die is the beginning of wisdom. But each of us is living this way in relation to others who live the same way. This proximity to our death brings us into a relation of sympathy with others. This is the foundation of universalizability principle in Kierkegaard. This understanding is not a rational universalization of norm by the individual in Kantian formulation of categorical imperative, but a result of mystical event that happens in an instant. Here comes the important point, that it's not about a rational speculation or philosophizing, but that which happens in an instant. We have examples of many seers and saints, various religious traditions, and in various major religions. As Andrew has also mentioned, and they talked about this mystical moment when everything becomes, these seers talk about this mystical moment when everything becomes a unity, when there is no other, and the other is one with the I. There is kind of unity in a feeling of unity which many saints mention, which again cannot be communicated to the people who have not realized, or the people or the philosophers who might have read it and understood it, but yet to subjectively experience it. So we can at least pass it on to others rather than claiming to realize the oneness with the universe. This happening or this happenstance is a consequence of a double reflection. It's another category that Kierkegaard uses, is double reflection. Or even in Plato also there is a repetition. There is a category called repetition. And understanding, double reflection is an understanding of already known concepts in terms of their meaning in one's own life. The collectivity of religious orders, and they convert this understanding of this converts this individual's ability of double reflection into different forms of rituals, and thereby they may miss the point. These Kierkegaardian concepts are later developed by Martin Buber, who is well known as a dialogical existentialist. Dialogical because Martin Buber, his philosophy is basically on relationality. His famous book, that I and Thou, which was published in 1923, it gives the foundation of his dialogical philosophy, and it gives a very invigorating perspective to hospitality also. His philosophy revolves around the way we address each other. The way we not simply addressing in spoken form, but the way we address with a feeling of relation to each other as I-it relation. In I-it relation is objectifying use of the other, which is trying to get something out from the other. If you are trying to get something out from the other, then you are treating the other as it rather than thou. Now, one cannot grow as a human being on his own in a genuine sense. We unfold ourselves and grow in relation to others. Even Buber says the same thing. Therefore, instead of I-it egoistic relation, if we could welcome our guest as thou, we are welcoming him in the witness of the eternal thou. Eternal thou. Eternal thou is the phrase that he uses for God. There is a typical Jewish way of not naming the God, but using different references, just like Buber uses, like the center, the face, the eternal thou. Buber is a Jewish philosopher, a theologian and an existentialist philosopher. So Buber says that even an atheist may be living a thou moment, I-thou moment. When we are saying thou, we are addressing the other in the presence of God, rather than we are addressing God himself. Now, Ambarasu may find some connect with the philosophy of Adigalar also in Martin Buber. It is not like having a friend or a guest. Having a friend is like as if I possess him. Because relation is not a possession, but to open up to the most vulnerable point of seeing each other in totality. When we say there is a movie Avatar, all of us must have seen it. Like the Navi people in James Cameron's movie Avatar, who greet each other as I see you, I see you. In true hospitality, therefore, we will welcome each other as if in the biological neural network of divinity. As if there is that tree, if you remember in the movie, which connects with every individual, every plant and everything, that a biological neural network is there. So in that network, you are meeting each other. True hospitable condition, true hospitality is one where we welcome each other as if he is part of that neural network. Of course, even in Buberian sense, the mutuality is not a fusion. Like I have given the example of Navi people so that we understand Navi people in Avatar, so that we understand it. But in true sense, Buber would not accept that fusion. In Indian Upanishadic philosophy, that fusion is acceptable. But this mutuality did not necessarily have a fusion. I and thou in Buber could be maintained. They could maintain even separate identity, and at the same time they could be mutually respectful to each other, or there is a mutuality without an identity. In a sense, therefore, though anachronistically, I find that Kierkegaard reconciles, which I beg your pardon, which is not related to this presentation, but Kierkegaard, in a sense, while preparing this presentation, I had a feeling that Kierkegaard, he reconciles Christianity with Nietzsche, in a sense, which I have not, this idea I have not developed fully. And he also reconciles Abrahamic philosophy with the Upanishadic philosophy. This we can think about at some other time, which definitely requires a separate exploration. But while thinking about this idea, I thought that he is the key between these two Eastern and Western perspective at the self and the other, which explains the today's topic of discussion, hospitality as mysticism also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mohan, for having enlightened us, all of us, with your presentation. We now look forward to some interaction with the participants. Forward to the participants.
Thank you.
Mohan,
Yes.
it was just brilliant.
Oh, but I'm always afraid of you only.
Not at all. Yeah, hearing you after a long time is it's simply superb. It's
Thank you,
very refreshing. The way you have been able to start with Derrida, go on to Kierkegaard, connect with Kant, also make a reference to Augustine, and then come back to Kierkegaard, and then end with Martin Buber was simply superb. That's the whole thing that why I said, without getting caught into the Kierkegaard model alone, you have been able to jump to other things and then, but stay on with Kierkegaard, which was very good. And one thing that I really liked when you said about the whole self, not becoming the other self, but discovering or rediscovering the self was also good. At some time in the beginning, you talked about an enabling platform of the other. You create a platform for the other to be or he to
be what he is.
To be what the person is. I have a little problem with understanding the whole concept. Become what you are. I've also used this, but I do not know why I use. But what happens now when the other person is adamant? The adamancy of the other, the adamancy of the guest. Sorry, the adamancy. Yeah, the adamancy of the guest. Okay. Yeah, the host is willing, but what do you think of the adamancy of the guest? Now, the whole presentation seemed to be one from our side to the other, but I think that is where hospitality of Derrida makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The hostility. So let's also not forget that there is a sort of a undercurrent that's playing. That is why he uses the word hostility and hospitality and puts them together as hospitality. My question is, how do you deal with the adamancy of the other while allowing that person to become what he or she is? Thank you.
Yeah, the biggest question that you had asked. This is the central problem of politics, international politics, and even political philosophy. Not only interpersonal philosophy, but the biggest problem in the world, rather, which we won't be able to answer in one sentence or two sentences. But see, that obduracy on the part of the other, these philosophical ideals that we are discussing, they presuppose that the other is also equally welcoming, because in Kierkegaard or even in Buber, we have seen that they are not thinking of someone who will be resisting the good gestures of the host. They are not anticipating this, at least at the theoretical level. But in practice, this we have seen these things. This all that I also mentioned: racism, the problem of after 9/11, welcoming people from our part of the world in America and Europe that hospitality is being resisted in many of the political formulations, and therefore the ultra-right movements, ultra-right political parties in Europe and America, they are gaining ground. But still, the hope of mankind still lies in trying to convince the other also to accept the kind of hospitality and the kind of openness with which the host is welcoming them. It is only at this stage of hope And unfortunately, at today's juncture, when the entire world is fighting with this pandemic, and even in the Delhi today, we have heard some other news which are disturbing news of violent and terror activities. There is no ready-made solution or philosophical solution to this. This is what I could say at the most.
Thanks, Mohan.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah. Sir, thank you for that wonderful exposition. It was so enriching to hear, especially like that the words creating that space to actualize the other, enabling platform for the other, then they actualize the potential of the other. So the other and the host and the guest are they seem to be the same level. If we consider the present scenario in India, we find that the other is painted as an enemy or a threat. The other is not equal to the other is always considered as a threat or as an enemy based on his religion or caste, etc. Now, how to solve this in a way philosophically? The other is not a threat, or how to convince people that the other, irrespective of his caste or religion, is not a threat, is at the same level, or is it possible?
Definitely, it is possible, and in the long run, the falsity of portraying the other as a threat, in the long run, that falsity and that illusion will definitely be dispelled. And that is the hope that not only as a human being we can look forward to, but also as a believing, having faith on democratic process and constitutionalism. We can definitely hope that such a portrayal will not be long lasting.
Okay.
And that cannot be accommodated in the constitutional scheme of things. Now here my professional and as an observer of politics, this comment I'm making, and not a philosophical answer to your question, but definitely there is a hope in the various structures and institutions that our system has evolved.
Okay.
That thing will not sustain such outlooks very long.
Long time. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Excuse me, I'd like to ask a question.
Yes.
Brother, 1 minute, just 1 minute. Just 1 minute. Let me just conclude this. Not conclude, just carry on with the conversation. Francis definitely asked a very pertinent question, and the answer was also very good. I just want to add on to that. The whole element of despair, arises because of a sense of helplessness. But then there is again more to that. There is a concept called which in psychology is called as learned helplessness. Again and again you're made to feel that you're helpless is one thing. And if that, when I'm asking a question, how do I convince the other that the other is not an enemy? Is it arising out of a sense of hopelessness or helplessness, or is it arising out of a genuine concern? So if my standpoint, the point from which I'm asking if that is arising out of a learned helplessness, then I think the correction has to be first on this side. And as Mohan rightly said, definitely the illusion of falsity cannot last for a long. It may take time and may not be in our lifetime either.
No.
But definitely, but definitely the illusion of falsity will fall on its own weight. So that is a deep hope that I have.
Thank you.
Brother, please.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. I'm a student of philosophy, so all of your presentation was really a fruitful one. I just thought that you just re-lecture all Western philosophy. So in the beginning, you started with that hospitality must be unconditional, and also you came in the middle, you said philosophy is to discover and rediscover already what is discovered, and you ended that the possibility or we need to find out his own authentic self, standalone mentality and individuality. So all your presentation, I found out that we need to at first we need to find out our own self, in the sense self discovery has to be taken care. So I just compare this with the Socratic maximum, know thyself.
Yes.
So in this all of your presentation, it was beautifully narrated, but how when we stand alone and when we don't live in the crowd and when we just awaken to our own authentic self, how is this hospitality is possible? Because this hospitality is not just to do with oneself, it is with the other fellow being who are living with us. And also you said that this must be unconditional. So definitely this unconditional hospitality possible only when we are selfless. So the other question or other request I want you to put forth is that how is it possible, or what should we do to rediscover our own self, and what are the ways that we can unconditionally relate with our own fellow being, in the sense hospitality? How can it be an unconditional one? Thank you.
Yes. Socratic ideals of know thyself, you have rightly mentioned. That is why even Kierkegaard is called Danish Socrates. And his method is Socratic, his ways are Socratic, rather a Christian Socrates, rather than a Greek Socrates. Kierkegaard is a Christian Socrates, they say. And so far as again the similar question that the problem of the other, the problem of the other, this philosophy is presupposed that the other is also at the similar platform. And similar platform, at least he is willing to accept your hospitality, willingness to accept this hospitality. All these philosophies are based on this presupposition. Now, the willingness to accept that hospitality, or if someone comes to your house with an idea of destroying you or with an idea of harming you, then that hospitality will not become possible. So at this theoretical level, the presuppositions are also to be taken care of. And so far as becoming what one already is, or becoming the authentic self himself, I have mentioned about Heidegger's idea of, you can just, I will suggest you one thing. If you are interested in existential philosophy, then there are 10-minute videos on existentialism, on all existentialist philosophers. This Heideggerian thing I have liked the most. He says, go to the graveyard at least once in a week. That will help you understand your true self, or to understand, you will understand your life after your understanding of death. And there is in Hindi or even in Sanskrit, there is a saying, Smasan Vairagya. Have you heard about it? Smasan Vairagya. If you go to the crematorium, then there will be a Vairagya, or Vairagya. Father Robin, batana kya hai? Vairagya, Tamil mein, Vairagya is in the Tamil word also.
Vairagya is Tamil word only. I am also a Tamilian.
Yes, sir.
It is there.
Vairagya, that Vairagya may arise in that moment. But if you visit there weekly, then that Vairagya will stay with you. And that Vairagya is not this Heideggerian Vairagya is not that of Indian kind of Vairagya, but it existential, he has given an existential tone, existential touch to it. That you will discover your true authentic self by being constantly aware of the realities of life, and not looking at yourself from the eyes of others. But what you really are is something that you yourself know. You don't need to follow a list of virtues, but once you realize what you really are, then the virtues will definitely follow. This is what the existential ethics also is based on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Martin. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes. This is Martin, teaching philosophy in Satyanilayam. And first of all, hearty congratulations. Really, this is one of the best papers that I ever had. That is what my feeling. And you have presented within the short time the essence of entire Kierkegaardian thought. And you place the theme of this hospitality within his project of moving truth from the mode of knowing to the way of being. That is what I feel that. First, I was doubting, how is he going to connect hospitality with Kierkegaard? That was really interesting for me. But the way you developed your presentation, really, it is nice. And how he doesn't teach virtue to others like the crowd does. And also, you expounded hospitality within the Socratic method, where he allows others to retain their own identity and integrity. That I like. In this way, you expanded the horizon of hospitality to another level. That is what I feel. And also moved the entire theme from the propositional to personal, and also from the rational to the relational. That is what the movement I have seen in your presentation. And that is what we need to do today. As we are running many institutions, we need to allow the people to think for themselves, because the change that we want to see in others should be the change that we should see in ourselves. That is the thing that I feel. So this theme of hospitality is really, really helpful for us to understand the society and to respect the integrity of the other. Thank you.
Thank you. You have articulated my presentation in a form which even I could not have done. Thank you very much.
Sir, I have a small question. You have been explaining about the hospitality from the existential point of view. From Indian perspective or from Spartan perspective, when we speak about hospitality, I personally feel that it is very much conditional. We speak a lot about hospitality, all the religion, and even our Tamil literature or Vedic literature or whatever. We have an enormous amount of literatures, and everything speaks many things about hospitality. But all these matters about hospitality, I personally feel it is a kind of fragmented hospitality, or a kind of epistemic conditioning had gone through behind all this conception, I think. So I'm personally, or I'm hospitable to few group of people, or whom I love, or my own group of people. But the same hospitality is not shown to others. So how to understand this? Then can there be any way of speaking, universally speaking about hospitality, or only it's a very subjective, very personal thing? Yes, it's a kind of clarification on that.
There is, of course, a difference between the ideal and the actual, and there is no denying to that fact. And ideally speaking, if there is a condition in hospitality, then it's not in hospitality. But in actual practice, which we see every day, that we welcome, even in our parties, weddings, we welcome the equals or people from higher strata, rather than feeding the poor, or rather than or even we could see that even the leftovers are not given to the poor. This is what happens in practice, and therefore we can go in this context in which you have spoken about. We should go back to Ambarasu, what Ambarasu has presented, and that kind of service and that kind of institutions that the seers and saints and these religious organizations have developed in every society. And that kind of hospitality you can really be proud of. and not in one or the other sects, but in every sect and everywhere. That thing is there, and religious institutions, religious organizations should be praised for that. You can see in Delhi particularly, I have seen the Gurudwaras doing these services, and irrespective of caste or religion, or even during this pandemic time, during last year and last year, all these religious organizations have done very praiseworthy work. These things, they only in an institutionalized form that those resources could be generated and those things could be done.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Sir, I was very impressed by your very edifying presentation. It was very inclusive of many Western philosophers, especially existentialists. Existentialism, as we know, that it emphasizes on the individual subject. So here in the communion that is proposed, or the hospitality proposed by Kierkegaard, or the way you see Kierkegaard's invitation to enter into dialogue or relation, is it from the point of treating the other as a subject or the object? If only a person like Martin Buber, who says, I, thou, the other is thou, the other is seen as more than what I am, more than what I could imagine. That's how he treats the other, where there is a possibility of treating the other as a subject. But do we also see the similar thing with regard to Kierkegaard, the father of existentialism?
Yes. In Kierkegaard also, he says objectivity, objective truth, or in that sense, the other is also as a subject, not as an object. Means not as in thou relation, in Buber's I-thou relation also, the other is thou, not only in the sense of bigger than I in the sense of modesty, but not bigger than I was equal to me. But in Kierkegaard particularly, it is only subjective, only the subject, only as a subject and not as anything else. It is the subject. Just like the knowing subject is also, just like the I. Actually, Kierkegaard is not that Buberian kind of dialogical philosopher, but that Buberian possibility is already potent in Kierkegaard. He doesn't mention, talks about I, thou or I, you relation, but the mention of other comes in between.
Yes, sir, we truly commend your dedication and appreciate your presentation. We are grateful for your availability with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
As we conclude this webinar, Dr. Robin S. Thielen, Director of Satyanilayam Research Institute of Philosophy and Culture, will propose a vote of thanks.
First of all, I would like to thank everyone for being here this evening. I'm not very enthusiastic today because I'm still having a cold, and the COVID test has been taken. Let's hope that it is negative. Okay. First of all, I'd like to begin thanking Dr. Mohan. Mohan has been very kind enough to readjust the dates. Last time when we met him, and the program was supposed to be held 2 months ago, and for certain reasons we had to shift it. It was both rain here and a lot of other programs. But very true to his nature, he, without getting any annoyance, he simply said, I will adjust. And as a joint director of the parliament, that he is quite a busy person. Yet, thank you, Dr. Mohan, for your time, for your availability. On an academic note, thank you for the clarity with which you were able to interconnect many philosophers. Thank you for the depth that you have displayed today in existential philosophers. I would really like to appreciate you. And on a personal note, I'd like to thank you for your friendship, and thank you for being the person you are to me. Thank you. Thank you, Father Anbarasu, for the wonderful passion that you still hold, and the passion with which you have prepared this talk 2 months in advance. The speed with which you have been working is beautiful. And the passion that you display gives me a fright that I have to cope up with you. And that is a wonderful feeling as well. Thank you, Anbarasu, for your wonderful paper today. I'd also like to thank all the participants who are here today, especially students from OMI. Thank you, brothers, for being there with us. Our own, whenever we have sent an invitation, you all have been with us, and we really appreciate your presence. And thank you for the wonderful presence that you have given us, and also thank you for the interaction that you have given. I'd like to thank our own SNRI scholars. All our programs are held by the scholars, and but for them, this program would not have been possible. So I'd like to thank all our scholars, especially thank the moderator of this session, Mr. Philip, for the wonderful coordination of this program, and also like to thank our program coordinator, Father Lindsay Lobo, for beautifully designing that poster and for the many background works that he keeps on doing. I'd like to thank our own students. They had to go now for a prayer, and I think therefore they are not here. But I'd like to thank them for their presence. And the biological neural activity of being together comes to an end now.
This one from the movie.
It's from the movie, yes. I'd like to thank all of you and see you in our next month's ZSA seminar. Thank you all. God bless you.
Thank you, Father Robin. Once again, we thank you, all of you, for your active participation and contribution to the philosophical world. Stay safe, stay happy. We look forward to meeting you next month in our next seminar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.